I wish I had a teleprompter today to keep me on topic and to help me get through the sermon, because I'm not quite ready to speak. Then I don't think I have to say why that is the case. Too many emotions that I don't only find inside myself, but also that I've been handed to by different people. Too many conversations and too much to read from different angles about our election. So I would have rather just be quiet and take a nice hike and enjoy what's left of the fall colors. But I couldn't arrange for a substitute preacher quickly enough, so here I am. When the fog clears is the sermon title, based on that passage in Matthew, specifically one verse that I will try to share with you. And then also I want to add a reading from the book of Hebrews, chapter 12. Chapter 12, verses 12 through 15. Lift up your tired hands then, and strengthen your trembling knees. Keep walking in straight paths, so that the lame foot may not be disabled, but instead be healed. Try to be at peace with everyone, and try to live a holy life, because no one will see the Lord without it. Guard against turning back from the grace of God. Let no one become like a bitter plant that grows up and causes many troubles with its poison. We will also find God's word in these words. We could have today obviously ignored the events that is still on everybody's mind, and that is firmly part of us and that have been part of our lives for about 18 months. We have been exposed to an intensity of debasement in our civil conversation that I've spoke out against over a long period of time for quite a while now. And I think everybody was just tired and wished that the whole thing could be over. Now it is over. But I think we have to acknowledge where we find ourselves. And I'm not speaking about myself, I'm speaking about what I pick up from people talking to me, calling, emailing, people from our church, people in the community, people from elsewhere in the US, and then also from overseas, from other nations. I think we have to try and determine where we are. I think it is good to determine how we arrived here. I think it is good to try and figure out how to proceed from here and where we want to go. And if I look at where we find ourselves, I observe and I experience in what people share with me an estrangement between people, in families, where children don't want to talk to their parents, where there's so much anger also between friends, lifelong friends almost, where there's that estrangement and sometimes a bitterness, and also anger. And I see some people feeling uncomfortable in their own skins, in their own environment, in their own lives. And some people express trauma. I've heard so many times people on the one side saying, this is like 9/11. This is traumatic. I don't know what to do. And I hear people on the other side saying, I feel rejected. I feel that I am almost despised or pushed out from conversations that I used to be part of, and people politely ignoring me, which is a painful experience for many. I think we have to acknowledge that there is division. And I think we have to pause. We have to pause and try to look clearly, like when the fog has lifted and light is shed and light streams in, and makes clear what is happening, and perhaps also light up a path for us from the place where we find ourselves. I think we have to pause and try to think clearly. And I want to suggest two things that I think will suit us well in this thinking and in this looking, in this searching and trying to find a way to move forward. And the first thing I want to mention is what is clearly part of our tradition, the Christian tradition, that has been held dear and that is firmly embedded and part of the fabric and the very core fibers of our tradition, and that is the truth. We are reminded over and over, again and again, in our scriptures, in our sacred text, hold on to what is true. We should seek the truth as followers of Jesus, as people who claim to be living in covenant with God and with one another as God's people. Hold on to the truth. Seek the truth. The second thing I want to mention that I think that we should hold on to and that we should employ as a core value and very much part of the essence of our tradition, as I understand it. And that is what Jesus also expressed when he said in Luke 6, be compassionate as God is compassionate. Identifying that as the very essence of the being of God, to be compassionate. And in our looking and our searching with these two tools or things to hold on to, I think there are three places where we need to look. The first one is that we should look inside ourselves. This election held up a mirror to us. We should look into that mirror and not see it as a mirror darkly, as Paul speaks of. Yes, we have so much that we don't understand and that we're grappling with and trying to sort out, but we have to also look into the mirror clearly while seeking the truth and with compassion. Looking inside, I think it is important for us at this stage in seeking our truth to ask ourselves if our truth has not become such that we have become immune to truth from elsewhere. That we have developed the inability to consider alternative perspectives. That we have been lured to cherish the laziness of this sloppy truth of social media. And the so-called truth that the cable networks, whichever one we prefer to create our universe for us, dash up for us as the truth. I think we have to pause and ask ourselves, what is the truth that we embrace and why do we do it? We have to develop the ability again to think critically and to employ the best research we can find. Through hard work and through consistent application and a faithful search for the truth, not the one that we prefer, to try and guide us. But even more importantly, we have to look at our truth and determine, is this truth that we embrace still guided by what we find in our moral compass, in our tradition, and in the Word of God, as we call it in our sacred text? Is that still our highest priority? Does that still determine what we think and why we think that? We owe it to ourselves, to our children, to our friends. We owe it to this congregation. We owe it to the nation and to the world. We have to look inside ourselves, each one of us, with truth and with a moral compass of compassion. We also have to look beyond our myopic self-interest. We cannot afford to withdraw into ourselves and say, I want to weather the storm by myself in isolation. I want to look after my own interest. Yes, in an uncivil world and environment where we feel threatened, it is perhaps easy to say, let us look at the pocket of civility and decency. Let us try to protect that with all our might, and the rest can literally go to hell. We cannot do that. We have to look beyond ourselves and continue with dedication and with commitment to do that. We have to look beyond ourselves into the pews that we share with people from different persuasions. We have to look at their truth, and we have to look at each other with compassion. This ability that we have unlearned, we must embrace that again. We must relearn the ability to speak to each other in the way that we do not see in the outside world, but that I hope we have begun to practice in this community. The conversations that were difficult is probably going to become more difficult. But for the sake of all that we hold dear, and for the sake of what we cherish as followers of Jesus, we need to look beyond ourselves. We also need to look beyond ourselves with compassion, to seek the truth and see if we have not become so embalmed in our own truth that we have become deaf to the voices of fellow citizens that perhaps feel left behind, that feel that they are struggling while others are enjoying so much, and who feel powerless, who feel resentment, who feel there is no place for them at the table. We have to do as Jesus did, look at them with compassion. We also have to, in the same search for truth, be willing to not mince our words, but where there is racism, whether overt or covert, to call it out and to name it. Where there is sexism, where there is xenophobia, where there is greed, to name it, to speak truthfully, and in a compassionate way, engage the conversation to try and turn that around. We also have to look beyond ourselves towards the world. And I saw a snippet on BBC television, I don't know, somewhere in the week, I think it was yesterday, of a 15-year-old boy in Madaya, one of the suburbs of Damascus in Syria. He's alone, he's been alone for a year now. He's starving to death because they can't get supplies through to them except dry beans and wheat. His mother had to leave him behind when she fled with his sister because otherwise he would have been conscripted to fight for Assad. So she left with his little sister. She's in Europe somewhere. His father is in prison, in the Assad prison. This boy has tried to kill himself twice, to commit suicide, because he said, I cannot die the slow death of starvation, and there is no hope for me. I'm one of the forgotten people of this place where 400,000 other people are also starving to death. I think we have to put aside the luxury of not being able to look beyond ourselves, seeking truth, and with compassion. And then in the third place, and this is metaphorically speaking, we have to look up, because God is not in heaven somewhere in a different place or a nice place, and we are in another place. So looking up is metaphorically meaning, because we have to find our truth in the source of compassion again. We have to acknowledge that God's Spirit is in us and around us, and therefore the potential for God's kingdom to break through and break forth is in each one of us, if we have the willingness and the courage to give that legs and standing in our reality, our personal reality, in that of our family, in this church, in the nation, in the world. We have to look up to again determine the source of all that is good, and to make that our highest priority again. René Descartes was a philosopher. He died in 1650. He lived just after the Reformation. He formulated what most of you probably know, the dictum cogito ergo sum. That's the Latin. I think, therefore I am. Why did he formulate it that way? He lived in the aftermath of the Reformation, when Martin Luther and others broke away from the Roman Catholic Church and started the Reformation. That caused upheaval. It resulted in religious war, continuous religious wars. There was chaos in Europe. There was uncertainty. And many Frenchmen, including Descartes, pinned their hope on Henry IV of Navarre to end the wars and bring peace to France and to Europe, but he was assassinated. So it resulted in more chaos and more despair and more uncertainty. And Descartes went on the search what to find to structure his life around, because the truth of the church was gone. It brought him violence and continuous war. The truth of the state was gone. It brought uncertainty and despair. And Descartes formulated this after searching. He said, I can say I exist because I know I think. And he built the world around that as a point of departure and certainty. This is what I will build my life on. I want to ask you in his example, when looking up, to find anew the certainty of God's presence in you and around you. And let our dictum become, let it be, because God is, and because God is present, therefore we will seek the truth. We will be compassionate. We will do justice. We will be able to reach out and bridge the abyss of the divide that seems to have been created through hatred and through seeing each other as the other, seeing the world as the other. And therefore, now more than ever, take heed what I read to you from the book of Hebrew. Strengthen the hands that have become tired. Strengthen the trembling knees, so that the lame foot may be healed. And above all, straight through to the loving God, so that we may not become like bitter plants that grow up to poison our environment. May God's Spirit lead us there. May we be willing to do that work. And let us live in that hope. May we be willing, now more than ever, to speak the truth, to do the truth. To do so with compassion, especially for those that live in fear, those that do not have a voice, those that find themselves on the wrong end of power equations. May God lead us there. May we follow. If not, then God help us. Amen.